Agenda item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies? Agenda item 2, chairperson's business. I refer members again to the note of the informal meeting held last week with Farmers for Action, pages 5 to 21.
Agree to come back to that at the end of the meeting?
Yeah. Can I advise members that an informal meeting was held this morning with the NI Retail Consortium. A note of the meeting will be circulated to members in due course. I advise members that it is planned that I and the Deputy Chairperson will be meeting informally over lunch with the newly formed TV Strategy Partnership on the 17th of November. That is a meet and greet, get to know you event. The committee will also get the opportunity to hear from the partnership in 2015. Any member who wishes to attend should inform the clerk. Agenda item 3. Minutes of the meeting 14th of October 2014. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting 14th of October 2014 at pages 23 to 27. Are members content that the draft minutes are accurate? Read. So I will sign. Okay, agenda item 4, matters arising. Can I refer members to matters arising at pages 30 to 132. Are members content to action matters arising as suggested in the index sheet on page 29? Okay. Agenda item 5. We have an oral briefing from Rural Support, Anti-Poverty and Social Inclusion. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 134 to 136? And briefing paper from Rural Support, which is a table paper, which you've received. And just wait on the members. Again.
Hello.
Right, welcome Marion McCracken, Chairperson, Jude Can, Development Director, and Sam Campbell, Board Member. Mr. Ray, welcome. Can I ask just to take up to 10 minutes to give your presentation, and then we'll have some questions.
Right.
Thank you.
I was going to introduce, but you've just done that.
Okay.
I am Marion McCracken. I have the chair of Rural Support for the past 4 years. I'm about to stand down actually from my position. The Vice Chair is Sam and our Development Director is Jude. At the end of the day, I'm actually a farmer's wife. No high-powered business person or anything else. I've come from the wilds of McGilligan. Dairy farmer's wife, in fact, a sign of the times in farming. We're now the only dairy farmer left in the whole area, which is, my husband says years ago there used to be 14 or 15, but that's the way things have gone. But Rural Support was formed in 2002 in response to the food and mouth crisis. I'm sure many of the farmers remember that. It was a very hard time for farmers, and we felt that there was a need out there to support farmers in the rural community. The charity was established, as I said, in 2002, and we have a small team of staff. We have 3 full-time staff and a part-time staff member at the moment. We have 32 volunteers. Our volunteers are the backbone of and the experience and the wealth of our organisation. They come from many different backgrounds, mostly rural, ex-DARD, lots of experience there. We also have our board, who are also volunteers. There are 12 in the board at the present time, and again they're rural and industrial and DARD ex-employees. We have quite a wealth there. We have a GP, and we have people from, we did have a person from Samaritans, but now has been replaced by someone from Lifeline, so we have input from them as well. We provide a helpline service 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m, and this is managed by our trained volunteers at the evenings and over the weekends. Some of our successes: we provide support to farmers, farm families and rural dwellers across the whole of Northern Ireland. We have telephone support and home visits to people in times of crisis and times of distress. The efforts of the staff and volunteers have undoubtedly saved lives and supported many families through difficult times. Certainly, one of the people we've been speaking to recently said that rural support has saved their farm business. Actually, he said it saved his marriage and saved his life. But if you hear some of the case studies from our volunteers, it would really does make you feel very humble, and the extent of the work they do and just the need there is out there. We had an emergency fund back in March last year after the snow, and we felt we managed that very well. Unfortunately, we were given 50,000, and we could have used an awful lot more. The number of applications that came in, there was over 700. Obviously, we started off with great intentions, and we had to cut back. In fact, some of the people at the end of it were only getting £100 because that's all we could give them. But again, very humbling. Some of those people came back and thanked us for the difference that had made, even if it was just to pay one small bill or just to know that somebody had cared. It was great for us to feel that we're making a difference, and it was also good PR, we felt, for our organisation. We feel that we give good value for money. Our core funds come from DARD, and without that, we really feel we couldn't, and we have to thank DARD for that. We hope for the continued support of DARD. They fund up to a maximum of 90% of our funding, 85,000 is about the figure at the moment. Just to show the value for money, last year, 2013-2014, our volunteers would have worked about 5,000 hours. And if you bring that at £20 an hour, you're talking 100,000. The board are all volunteers. They are volunteers. They don't take anything from the organisations whatsoever. And we've actually managed to leverage other funds from other sources to approximately £25,000 in the past year. So is there anything?
No, that's okay. No, is that, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I just continue on a little bit.
That's okay.
If that's okay, Chairman.
Okay.
Just to give a wee bit of an update on the helpline. So the helpline is the core of rural support, and then the outreach that our volunteers do. So over the last 2 years, the calls to the helpline have more than doubled in that 2 years. So that just sort of gives an indication of the pressure that's out there among the farming and rural communities. During the snowstorm of spring last year, as Marion mentioned, our calls actually quadrupled through that period, but they've remained high since then. Generally, during the summers, we've had a good summer and a good autumn, but our calls have remained high in September and into October. The issues that are coming through in the helpline, we did a wee bit of research to look at what are the main issues coming through. When you break it down, the presenting issue, the highest percentage is around financial stress and debt issues among the farming and rural community. Other issues, of course, the CAP reform, increase in isolation, a lot of loneliness out there in the rural communities, and farming, as you know, can be often a lonely occupation. So the calls that come through to our helpline are then followed up. About 60% of the calls are followed up by volunteers who will provide support over the phone or actually go out to the farm and provide support in the home. We find that works very well. It's a befriending service in some ways, that actually having somebody from outside the family or outside the community to talk to about some of those problems is very worthwhile. So when we looked at the issues that are out there, the financial stress was one that we wanted to really try and focus on. So we actually approached the Public Health Agency and got a small pot of money to do a 6-month pilot around tackling financial stress. So through that, we were able to send out financial mentors who have that expertise around farming businesses and farming accounts to go through some of the accounts with farmers in their own homes, and that's only been up and running for a month. We have a 6-month pilot there, but already we've seen a significant uptake in people coming through for that service. So Sam's going to finish up our presentation here.
Thank you, through the chair, and thank you to all for giving us this opportunity. Just I suppose at my day job, chief executive of an artificial insemination company. We're owned by farmers. 10,000 farmers own us. We're based up at Temple Patrick. Down south, we're known as Eurogene, and again, we have 10,000 customers down there. And you know, the sobering effect of that was 20,000 farmers that our company are in contact with all the time. The pressures are, doesn't matter what region you're from or where the geography is, it's the same list of pressures. Now again, we're specialists, we make no apology for it. We are in a niche of looking after agri and rural stress issues. Very sobering again that there are 300 each year people on 40 take their lives in Northern Ireland. I'm sure you've heard these figures through Mr. Poots' department in the past, and half of those are in rural areas. Now, our job is not just to try and prevent what is very much a terminal end in some cases, but to be more proactive and actually looking at providing support and trying to minimise the stressors that are leading to mental health issues on our farms. And to say, one of the big pressures there. One of the things we're different than Samaritans or Lifeline in that we are specialists with a rural empathy. People coming from rural GP backgrounds, coming from AXDARD backgrounds, AXBank backgrounds, etc., bringing a specialism to help solve specific pressures for farmers. I don't need to tell you all about the pressures on farming, but weather, for example, that obviously can be up and down. Income volatility. Any of you are in dairy, beef or sheep certainly know what that means. We can be the highs of milk price at 30 pence and we can be the lows before we know it at well below break even, or the stresses that beef and sheep have been under the last while. Cap policy, yes, if we only knew where it was going in the longer term, yes, again, it's a stressor. Jude mentioned the loneliness, the isolation, no holidays, no sick pay, no pension schemes on many farmers. Isolation, both personally, professionally and geography. I come from a wee townland near Dromara called Derry Townland down in County Down, and a bit like Marion. My father's day there were 17 active farms there. Today there's 1.5, so what I would call it active farms. That just leads to isolation. There used to be a lot of shared labour, all of the issues that have now gone. And we talk about struggling in silence. Yes. Rural people very often struggle in silence. Some of them feel that what I'd call the shame of helplessness, even failure at times, and they don't share it. Very interesting survey done by Irish Association of Counselling. 1 in 3 farmers do not tell anyone about their personal or professional problems, and I think that's where a lot of the further stresses come from. Isolation. Ageing, average age of farmers, 60 years of age plus. It is good to see youth coming back in, our colleges getting fuller again, but unfortunately we have what I would call an area there that red tape is a big pressure, not just isolation and financial, but red tape. I could put myself into that camp very soon, and you know, I'm not exactly computer literate, even though I have to be at an element in business, but can you imagine filling in the online everything these days? Can you imagine doing without checkbooks in 5 years? These are stresses to people that just aren't used to that environment, and we have, I believe, have to have an empathy and a way forward for people in that side. Technology change, but some are being left behind. Animal disease, plant disease again, TB again, another scourge in certain parts of the country. If you're locked up with TB, that in turn leads to financial stress and cash flow problems, all of the issues. That's just another example of where we come into market volatility. Two-tier farming, this is my last point. Yes, I think we have, I'm very happy about the Going for Growth strategy. Great to see our industry put on the map as a core business here, but I have to worry a little bit that we could evolve into 2 tiers. We will have those who are in the position to be able to develop and become major part of the food production chain. But equally, we will have a large number who will never have that scale and who could be actually left behind. And it's that medium, smaller farmer may become even more isolated and vulnerable in the future. When I look at 28,000 farm businesses, I see 6,000 maximum with one full-time employee. That in turn means that there's 22,000 who are only part-time, and those people could very much become a 2-tier structure.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and can I congratulate you on the work you do with rural communities, and I know you cover a number of organisations. Mara is involved with yourselves, no, yeah, aren't they? Yeah, Mara.
We work alongside Mara, but
That's what I thought.
we're
Yeah,
not
Mara,
over
yeah.
them, yeah.
So I'm aware of some of the work that is done, and certainly it is welcome. DART aims to work in partnership with stakeholders to deliver positive outcomes for people in rural communities. Does rural support feel that this has been achieved? You know, does more could be done? Or?
There's always, I mean, I suppose as Marion said to the Chair, we very much value the support, because while there's a lot of volunteer effort and volunteer skills going, I think we'd all agree it takes a certain amount of coordination, and that's where our executive team work morning, noon and night to pull this all together, and indeed to liaise with all of the other organisations, Mara included, health agency included, and so on. There needs to be more joined up thinking, and I think we do get a good return out of the core grant there. Could we do better? Could DAR do better? Absolutely. I think if we could just get more joined up thinking at times, we'd all be the beneficiaries of it. But we should never underestimate, I think, what the core of this organisation, Rural Support, is, and that's the volunteer. The volunteers are the people who make it, with no disrespect to our executive or to our board. It's the people on the ground, 31 of them, who attend training courses once or twice a month in a whole range of rural subjects. They were originally brought together for crisis management. Foot and Mouth was a crisis. The weather problems up in North Antrim or in the Dramara Hills were a crisis there back a couple of springs ago. But you know, we've turned more proactive now. It's not just crisis and having a team of skilled volunteers who can deal with a crisis. It's more the day-to-day crises that are real for very many individual stakeholders in the rural community. And that's where I think at the end of the day we have to put the funding, the credit, the focus, developing a team of people who are prepared to put their time in there for free. They do need a bit of training, they do need a bit of coordinating, but that's what we could do better.
Well, I mean, I can declare an interest because I'm a farmer and I've been a farmer all my life, so I know something of the difficulties. And I remember we had my father milking cows in a wee 5 or 6 cow byre with a hand, so we're going back a long time. So I feel there's a culture of self-reliance, especially among older people, and there are people who are too proud to ask for help. How can you see that been addressed? It's very difficult to address that, I think. You know,
It's extremely difficult to address that. I don't know how you break down that. I think you just have to keep plugging and trying to get there. It's a pride thing, isn't it?
yeah, I think so.
They don't want to admit that they're struggling, but you know, as I say, where I come from, you know, we are. As Sam has said, this whole new digital age and all the rest, it really is scary. Like, I know people in my area who are very isolated. Anyone who knows the McGilligan, we have one road going through it, and everybody lives down a lane. I'm down a mile-long lane myself. So, you know, you don't see anybody. Whenever I first got married and moved over there, I remember, you know, yard full of people. Looking for money usually, mealmen, but at least they were there. It was somebody to talk to. Now you see nobody. Everything's direct debit and online, and for an older farmer who, some of them probably have never even turned on a computer, even to get them to go out to engage in those. They had a scheme a few years ago, learning how to use a computer. I really don't know how good that was. My husband keeps saying he's got this EDCL, this licence, but he can just about turn it on. He doesn't know how to use it. You know, it's...
Maybe if I could just add to
Yeah.
that, Maureen, I think we're seeing a little bit of a cultural change here. Rural Support are very actively involved in promoting our services. Now, the fact that the number of calls have doubled to the helpline indicates that there's stress and pressure, but it's also indicating that people are coming forward and seeking help. So the more we're out there being able to promote our services and talking to people at marts, agricultural shows, and having that face-to-face conversation, I think we are starting to break that down. Yes, there's a lot of pride out there when you're talking about mental health or financial issues, but we are seeing a small shift there, which is reassuring. The majority of calls coming through to the helpline are also from men. Very few other helpline organisations are getting that from men. So we are sort of reassured by the fact that people are coming forward seeking help.
And I suppose it's what our strapline's all about, listening, guiding, connecting. You know, we're not saying that we're able to do everything ourselves, but we are a listening ear, and I suppose we were all, the best thing we do is 2 ears, 1 mouth, as they say, and very often we need to use them in that proportion, and that's what it's all about. It's listening and getting the signals of what needs to be done. Then, obviously, guiding and connecting to a number of other organisations as well. And I think communication, very, very important, because we're talking about back to that age group. We're talking about people who are isolated, and you know, they're not all going to be illiterate, and we just have to be very careful that we don't get too modern for our own good, as they say.
Okay.
I think too the fact that the men ring, we find that a Monday morning, whenever after the weekend, after the family have left, after the wife's gone to work or whatever, that's when you would get the men ringing, whenever they've been on their own a few hours and they realise how isolated and depressed they are.
Probably don't even want to know their wife, probably. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
True, but
yeah.
then that's why they're ringing their way. Sidney Anderson, Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. The Chair has touched on some of the points I want to raise. It's an issue I think maybe it was last week I raised the issue in relation to how you get farmers to engage. Proud people that they are, and they don't like to divulge the difficult circumstances they may find themselves, and it's only when they're really in difficulty, in some cases when it may be too late, to actually for you people to do things. And in another forum I faced issues like this and asked questions about it, and I don't know if we're getting on top of it or not, to try and get these people to come forward. I know you have your helpline, and obviously your figures they're doubling up on what you previously had. Did I take it there? It works from 8 to 8, 7 days a week?
8 in the morning till 11 at night.
Oh, 8 to
7
11,
days
sorry.
a week, every day of the year. Yeah.
Just on that, when you take the call, and what feedback do you? I know when you follow it up, do you get really engagement with those people at that particular moment? They're on a downer, they ring you and they say, but how do you follow it up?
Our figures show that 60% of our calls are followed up by a volunteer either going out or engaging or ringing back or whatever. That, certainly a percentage of our calls we signpost to other organisations or just people asking for help. But
Some of the calls are simply people asking for information, and that can be dealt with over the phone, or knowing where to go to access help. But as Maureen says, 60% of the calls come through, we would then refer on to a volunteer. I think that's one of the key strengths of rural support, because our volunteers are all from a farm and rural background, and they will go out and visit people in their own homes and develop that bit of a relationship, develop that bit of trust. And it's only after sometimes you have those face-to-face conversations that other issues start to emerge. They maybe phone up about form filling, but the reality is maybe there's problems with the bank, there's problems with DARD, there's marriage problems. That very often doesn't come through in an initial telephone conversation.
I think you're touching on it, Jude. It's actually the face-to-face contact. The initial phone call may give you a good lead in.
Yes, it's a connection
but it's to
point.
get them to that point, and certainly it's what you call sort of early intervention, or get in there before it gets too deep.
Exactly, and some of our volunteers will provide support. Sometimes it's over weeks, months, and in a couple of cases it's over years, where there's been long drawn legal disputes over land, serious family pressures, where they just needed somebody to talk to once a month, once a fortnight, just to sound off and say, here, this is what we're thinking of doing, can you provide a bit of support? In some cases they go to the bank with the individual to speak to the bank manager, because maybe that relationship has broke down. So it's that one-to-one support that is very beneficial.
And the single farm payments is always a big issue for farmers who have been blocked for some reason or other, and we do have people who can help just to go to the bank and tell them that this money will be coming. It may not be just this week, but it's definitely there, because sometimes the banks are not our biggest allies.
Just on the banks, I was going to come on to that. You engage with the farmer, with the rural dweller, and if it is a financial problem, you obviously have roadshows or different things to engage with the people themselves. But how much engagement would you have with banks or financial institutions to get them to realise the difficulties that maybe farmers are in at any specific time. So I think there's a bit of work maybe there. Do you do that work?
We do a lot of work in that through the chair, and it's one that is never ending, because the different pressures that come along. It's a never changing environment. I use milk prices, I use beef prices, and if you're in the farming, you will realise milk price was maybe 35 pence 6 or 8 months ago. It's more going towards 20 pence very rapidly at the minute. Margins on beef and sheep have been well covered. They're probably in the negative side without single farm peg. In fact, in 90% of farms, they are negative without the support of single farm payment. So pressures can change, vary, and volatility of pricing, all of that puts under pressure. This is just one little example of a current programme we're doing, and it's specifically targeted at financial stress in the rural environment. Now, we're fortunate enough, I suppose we play it both ways here. We have a number of retired agricultural bank managers. We have people who maybe used to wear the other side of the cap, but that does bring a lot of experience as well, and indeed I suppose burying the head in the sand is something that we see all too often. A small problem, bury the head in the sand, becomes a big problem. And very often, if you can just get someone to talk about it, if you can counsel them, if you can get them to actually share, there is a solution. Unfortunately, too many people allow this to go on, becomes an unsolvable, affects their health, their mental state, and unfortunately, we all too often see that those just get too far. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think it has to be sort of, as I say, early intervention. Can I ask you just finally, the other rural organisations such as Rural Development Council, Rural Community Network, and those people, do you engage, or do you have any discussions with those people, or are they with you?
Yep.
We do from time to time meet with RDC and RCN, and very often they will signpost people who maybe contact them into our services, or people that they come across. So it is very important that we're aware of who's providing what. I have to say that they do excellent work in highlighting some of the issues and some of the policy issues that we don't have the resources to go to put behind. But there is a good working relationship there, yeah.
And equally, we would have the volunteer team that they don't have, and that's how the two have to interface with each other.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you very much. I wish you well in the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oliver McMullen.
Yeah, Chair, thank you, and thanks for the presentation. Yes, you did mention the foot and mouth and that there, and I do agree with that one. But no help ever came into the Glens. And I was one farmer who did lose all his stuff.
Yeah, and foot and mouth side.
Yeah, foot and mouth.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I think foot and mouth can be used as a crisis management that probably wasn't best handled, in the sense that I'd give DARD, I will give them veterinary division, etc., credit for handling it at the time. It was out of that stress, I suppose, that this organisation was born. We weren't there, unfortunately, at the time of foot and mouth to be the listening ear that we are today. But whenever everyone sat down at the end of the foot and mouth crisis, basically rural support were then formed as a listening arm. That was one thing I think that DARD didn't provide throughout that crisis. People were left very much in fear. They didn't know what was happening, and particularly in areas that had hot spots, as they say, of foot and mouth. So something had to be done about that, and I think that's where the organisations, UFU, NIAPA, etc., all got together, and DARD, to be fair, and at the end of the foot and mouth crisis said, this cannot be allowed to happen again. People cannot be left isolated. They cannot be left not knowing what's happening, and that's indeed why the organisation was formed. But it was too late for that particular crisis. Let's say it was a reaction to that crisis. Hopefully, if that ever happened again, or any similar disease issue or crisis issue, the closest probably we had to a crisis since that was the snow event there. That again, while it maybe only affected certain areas, was very, very serious if you're stuck in the middle of it a couple of springs ago. Yeah.
I think that some people have the misconception that rural support do have money. We don't have money to provide. Last year at that time was the only time we were actually given that pot of money, and I know some of it did go to the Glens, definitely, but we don't. People will ring up thinking we have money to provide, but we can't give them money. We don't have that pot of money. We can signpost them to where they can maybe get grants or whatever, but we don't have the money. We give them the mental support and that's...
Or a counselling organisation, basically. Yeah.
Tom Martin.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me, thanks for the presentation. Apologies, I missed just the start of it. Quite interesting, Sam, you talk about a two-tier farming sector, you know, particularly maybe through the Going for Growth project. But surely there has always been a multi-tier farming sectors, because you know, you've never had everybody on an equal basis. You've some people with 200 and 300 milk cows, and you've other people still with 25 and 30 milk cows. You've people with 2,000 head of beef cattle, and you've still people with, you know, 20 beef cattle. So, you know, you've that range, and it's not always that I find the smaller ones that are maybe in the most difficulty. Quite often it's the bigger ones. On the issue of pressures, I think it's maybe a reflection of today's society. Doesn't matter what business you're in, there are I think increased pressures, and farming is no different. The slight difference with farming is that people are maybe more often working in isolation, and I think that's maybe the one difference that there is between that and some other businesses. But just wondering, you know, and I've referred people onto yourselves at times, but whenever people do come to you, what type of advice do you give them? Is it mainly signposting, or is it around more practical help in terms of trying to help them access that information instead of just signposting?
I think it starts with the listening. You have to have a good listener. I mean, that's the one thing we try to, with our 31 volunteers, each of them are, and secondly, you have to have an empathy. Each of those volunteers understand rural issues. You know, some other organisations maybe understand, such as Samaritans or Lifeline, understand a more generic or broad-based mental health issues. But we know the drivers and the causative factors of stress in the rural side. Now, listening, you have to get, very much as Jude said, very often the problem that the guy starts to talk about or the lady starts to talk about are not the root of the evil, let's say. And you have to get them opened up, talking. So it's a listening ear. That's what we provide. We're not funded to have grants, unfortunately. We're funded to have a team of trained counsellors. And if you get the proper counselling, then you start to get to the root of what the real issues are, and at that stage it may be referral to the public health side, or it may be referral to a financial institution, or it may be being a mediator in a certain event. The range of issues, as maybe you'd like to give a wee bit more, Jude, just of the background of other issues that become. Financial stress is obviously the number one, but some of the others, Jude.
Absolutely. Every call that comes through, as I'm sure you can appreciate, is unique, and everybody different circumstances. So finances is the biggest one coming through at the moment. I think one of the key points is our volunteers are all from farm and rural backgrounds, but they have different sets of skills. Some are farmers currently farming, some are retired farmers, so they can provide that technical, practical support that very often is the hook in as well, because you can start to have an easier conversation about that. But then we have other volunteers who are trained counsellors, so they can provide that sort of more emotional support as well. So depending on what the issue is, then we will try and identify the most appropriate volunteer with that expertise to follow up with it. The range of calls, you talk about the pressure on different types of farmers. Recently we had a call from a farmer who had 6 cows and the water bill had come in. He was under a lot of stress and was concerned that he was going to have to sell 1 cow to pay off the water bill. We have other farmers getting in contact and they're £300,000 in debt with a bank. Now, everybody deals with stress differently, but both those individuals, very different rates of debt, but both needing a bit of support and a bit of help. So we'll try and match up the most appropriate support to that individual that we can.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Ian?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for your presentation. You're based in Cookstown, but how far do you reach out? You know, you're talking about 31 voluntary workers, and you're talking about 2 staff and a part-time staff, isn't that right?
Yes, yeah.
But you know, on a 6 counties basis, there that wouldn't seem like a lot of.
Well, our volunteers are from across all of Northern Ireland, and our calls are coming in from all of Northern Ireland. I would say we've less calls coming in from West Tyrone and Fermanagh. And when you think about rural isolation, that's one area that we have focused some of our resources into, because we know the issues are there as well. Interestingly, with this new financial stress project that we just launched a month ago, the majority of our calls are coming in from Armagh, and that traditionally we weren't getting a lot of calls from Armagh. So word of mouth is a big factor in this, I think, too. When people, one or two individuals access a service and get something very beneficial in return, word of mouth, talking to your neighbour, is one way that the word gets spread there. But we have one client recently from Rathlin Island, so we are stretching across all of Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Just
I have a wee by bar chart there. That was 2013's colour location. The blue is Antrim. The County Down was the orange. They were the biggest. As Jude said, Armagh was very small, but there is a range. And
2013 was an exception because of the snow and fodder crisis.
Yeah.
So County Antrim, County Down, the worst hit areas by the snow, then our volume of calls increased significantly there.
But we aim certainly to be as broad spectrum of skills and covering every community within the north. Now our problem is 31. Not good enough, no. We were in the low 20s a year ago. We have managed to get that up to 31. We'd love to get it to 50. And one of the things that we appeal for, it's not always money. Money doesn't just make this organisation. The grant that we receive from DARD, valuable, absolutely valuable at being the fulcrum for giving us an organisation that can coordinate it. But we're always on the lookout for volunteers, and indeed that's one of our big recruitment drives always, is to get a broader base of volunteers from wider community representation and with a wider range of skills, because the more people we have on the ground, it's simply the more help we can provide.
Yeah. And I would like to explore then, like the information that you gather, is regarding the problems that are with farming communities. Have you a feedback system there, to put it back into DARD, for DARD to give DARD or whoever else a better understanding of the actual problems that do exist, Is it farm gate prices? We talked about it earlier on here today, farm gate prices. Are these some of the issues that are brought up, that puts people under stress, for example, and all of that? But is the feedback coming back into the relevant authorities, for them to get a better understanding of exactly the problem?
DARD do meet with us regularly, and we do tell them the issues. Like, again, I've a chart here, the different types of problem there is. Like, the largest bit is financial, but then there's farming specific, there's inheritance, there's succession, there's family relationships, there's health, and we would feed back into DARD, and they do.
Yeah, we meet with a DARD official every 2 months. We have a very good working relationship. What we try to do is, if we identify a bottleneck, if we see there's we see an increase of calls coming in, like recently it was around entitlements. That was a huge pressure on people and a lot of concern there. So we are able to feed back to DARD. These are the calls that are coming through. We've noticed a peak on a particular issue. What can we do to alleviate that? So during that time we actually got a team of our volunteers down to Stormont here to meet with some DARD officials to talk through where the entitlement issues were at, so that we have as much information as we possibly can have to help the callers.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Chair.
You've also gone out to the DARD offices and done training among the staff.
Yeah, all the DARD direct offices.
DARD direct offices, and
Very good.
And word of mouth, because organisations, I can only speak for the organisation I work with up here in North called AI Services. Well, 10,000 customers. So we don't waste a stamp, as I say, sending out a bill. Hopefully within that bill there will be information on the help and support that can be, because we're like every other organisation, we have people who can't pay their bills either, or who have stresses, and it's just getting that word of mouth or that direct focused contact to as wide an audience as we can.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Can I say, I think that certainly I would commend you for what you do. I think if you have 31 people that's prepared to give up their time voluntarily, that's a very big gift to give to the local community. I'm aware that there's quite a number of organisations that try to work with the rural community, and they're probably fractured somewhat. Is there any, would there be, or do you see any benefit in trying to come to an umbrella, to organise yourself in such a way that you work together? And that, would it be a benefit or would it not? To me, it would seem that it should be a benefit.
I see it as a logical progression. Certainly I'm sure all of those organisations doing very good work in their own right, but we should never have overlap or indeed worse still, missing areas that are being falling between two stools, as I say. And I think that's where the uniqueness of rural support really does come in. Yes, many other organisations have helplines or have contact lines, but very few organisations actually have the trained personnel on the ground. And I think that's the wee bit that totally differentiates us, is the 31 volunteers and the range of skills that are within that. And maybe I'm going over the top, but I believe the listening element is the key thing here. Helplines, yeah, helplines are to a penny. But it's someone who can actually listen and then get to the root of a problem. It's a counselling, it's all of the follow-up there, the befriending, whatever words you would like to use. Those are the bits that actually de-stress or get people in the right channel. And I think that's the one wee bit that makes us very different. Now, if I was looking at all of the pools of money that are coming into rural development and various other support organisations, I would like to see, I suppose, more to encourage more voluntary uptake. Sometimes our industry has to help itself, but it takes the pump priming to allow us to coordinate this. But then we have to get out there and help ourselves, and you can only do that with more volunteers and with a bigger team. And say the pump priming, we believe, is the key to that.
Okay. Any other questions on the answer? One, Edwin.
Yeah. A lot of people are under the, I suppose, misconception that farming is a healthy lifestyle, and it can be, but it can also, people are out working in very damp weather conditions, they're out working in sunshine and exposing themselves to too much sun. And then, of course, you have all of the issues that you have actually covered there about stress, isolation, loneliness, mental health issues. How closely are you working with the Public Health Agency in terms of getting those messages across? Is there a further opportunity to develop that? Because traditionally it has been hard to reach group, and men don't talk about health much, talk about mental health even less. So, how closely are you working with Public Health Agency, and what more can be done to ensure that those messages are getting out there?
I suppose we as an organisation are increasingly, because we see the issues and the drivers and the solutions very often here, is to get better cooperation all of the time between the various sectors. I would even say at times, DARD and Department of Health working closer together even at that level, and realising that it's a common problem here, a common area that needs solution. This pilot scheme that we're working on at the moment, which is actually funded by PHA, it's very interesting because it is the first time that we've had really cross-departmental support, and as a pilot we believe it has an awful lot to offer. It is basically the Public Health Agency recognising that the niche that we work within, in other words agriculture and rural stress, that some of those lead to health issues, and if we can prevent those at an earlier stage, preventative rather than waiting until unfortunately someone has a breakdown or worse, is the answer. And that's where this pilot scheme that is now started off with the Northern Health Trust, and I think has now been widened out into all of the health trusts. So it's an interesting 6-month pilot scheme, and I do believe it's a great template model for working in the future. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, Edwin. Thank you. Oliver, now question.
Quickly, what are you doing about the information that Mara has gathered?
Information that Mara's got, well, we're not Mara now. We're not Mara.
I know you're not Mara.
But what I would say is that information gathered by any organisation working within this sector should be much more cross.
I'm talking Mara.
Yeah.
Information was gathered in the rural areas specifically.
Yeah.
What that money was set aside for. What can you do with that information that's gathered now? What would you propose that's done with that information?
With Mara, are you aware of the Mara?
Well, I think with one of the aspects of the Mara maximising access to benefits for rural areas, I think one of the big issues is rural poverty is very often hidden. That goes under the statistics and under the radar in a lot of cases. So I think we would refer people in tomorrow who would contact us and wondering, are they entitled to some benefits? Very often a landowner or a farm owner, I think they own a bit of a land, they have an asset there, they're not entitled to anything. So that was one of the key values of the MAR project, was somebody to sit down and go through what benefit entitlements they might have. I suppose the information that's gathered from there can be used to pinpoint resources. So if we identify particular problems in different areas, then we can, and likewise they would refer through to us. If they're out providing support to an individual who they are concerned about, who may be suffering from stress or depression, they will always have leaflets of rural support and pass on our contact number.
Yes, but all that there you're talking about is referrals.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do we do with that information that's been gathered up after 18 months? I was waiting to hear you telling me that there should be now a coming together with all the relevant agencies to disseminate that information and to see what programme we can put in place. They have a 6-month pilot scheme here, very good. But part of that stuff coming in from Mara is part of this. So I'm a bit disappointed in the way that we haven't heard that there should be a coming together, because, you know, that's vital. That's vital, and we haven't nailed that yet. And what happens next?
You want to mention the network that you're hoping to evolve here, yeah?
In regards to?
Well, no, there's a network hopefully going to be put together even on helplines, as far as I'm aware.
Yes,
now, Judith, as our
helpline.
full-time executive, would know more about it than I do. And I think that's a step in the right direction. That's bringing all of the, if you want to call it, helplines into the one place. The second thing is the information database, of which we have a tremendous database, because every call is analysed into a certain box. Now, sometimes data is put in boxes, but is it financial? Is it whatever? And secondly, what follow-up does it have? Has it had counsellor follow-up, or has it had various one-to-one listening follow-up? That's the bit that makes us unique. And certainly anything that would marry all of those information databases together has to be the way forward, yeah?
We haven't decided what is the way forward. You know, I can understand what you're after saying to me there. But in reality, I've heard that time and time again. What I'm asking you is, for the rural dweller, what is the next step when you put out a programme and gather that much information that's gathered and visit the number of people that you have visited? That information then is sitting there pristine, ready to go, and I think the powers that be can't ignore that information. I think you should look at that information and run with that instead of running with other programmes, you know, because you're overlapping.
Yeah, I would agree, and I suppose this is the wee bit that makes us different. We feel I would love to have 60 volunteers instead of 30, properly trained up. Now, as I say, the training of volunteers is a very big element of our coordination. I think there's no point in having information, would be the way I would say, if you don't have someone to follow it up, listening, actually going out there and solving the issues. I think there's too many organisations registering what the problem is, but there's not enough trying to solve the problems. So that's where I would suggest that we need more volunteers to follow up whatever the information databases are. It's all right knowing what the issues are. It's actually solving the issues, and that's, I think, where we need to get to.
I think, Oliver, you're wanting information to gather. We do feedback to DARD, and at the end of the day, DARD have that information, should have that information, and they need to react and put something in place.
And I have no doubt that the MAR project is gathering a lot of information that should be used to influence policy and make changes there. We, as our support, we aren't lobbyists or policymakers. We're delivering this service. Some of the other RCN, for example, are better placed to use that information then to the policy officers that then can influence government decision making. But I have no doubt that there is good, valuable information there. But as Sam said, we aren't MARA. That's not our information.
Unfortunately, our 85,000 allows us to have a certain amount of coordination and allows us to train a certain amount of volunteers. Would love to do more.
Okay, Oliver. Joe Byrne.
Yeah, Chairman, apologies, I had to go out, so I may have missed that I want to ask you about. You've had a 3-year contract with DARD. It ran out in March 2014. I see you've been asked to carry out a review of the service to assist future plans and activity. Has that happened? What's the outcome and what's the chances of getting a further contract?
Yeah, we did do an evaluation at the end of the 3-year programme and designed another three-year strategic document to go forward. Unfortunately, the funding environment that we're in, we only got a 6-month interim fund, and we're now into the second 6-month interim fund because we've been told the 15-16 budget hasn't been agreed yet. So at the moment we're operating on a 6-month basis, which is not ideal for any organisation or any charity. We have good staff there that we don't want to lose, but it's an unfortunate situation that we're in. Ideally, we would like to be until another 3-year rolling programme.
The review of the service that you've carried out, has it come up with positives for you or not? And is DARD impressed with you or not?
I think all of the feedback that certainly we've had from DARD and evaluations we've had from DARD, yes, I think they do agree that we tick all the boxes there. We do believe this time it will not be a so-called grant to a charitable organisation. It will be a tender process, most likely going forward, and we welcome that because we actually believe that actually weeds out and stops a lot of the overlaps, and it's all about value for money. And if it's a tender process going forward with DARD, and we can put in our case and our track record to date, then we believe we have a lot to offer.
That's fine, James. Thank you.
Tom again.
Thank you, Chair. You have said about gathering all the information, so therefore you have the knowledge of what the real pressing problems are out there in the rural community. You have mentioned about feeding that back into DARD. But do you as an organisation ever put any recommendations to DARD as to what should be done that could help to solve the problems that you are faced with on a daily basis? Because I think, it's all right feeding in information and all, but since you're dealing with it on hands-on and you're having all this information, then you would be in a position to put forward recommendations as to what you would see could be a way forward to resolving some of the problems. Please do that.
An excellent point, and I think we're very fortunate actually. We recruited Jude here, some 3 years ago, and Jude comes from an academic background looking at all of the social issues, and indeed went to, one of his skills was going around a lot of the other countries from New Zealand and Australia down south and various other countries, and looking at the models, because we've all got the common problems, we've all got the common issues there, and Jude has put together a number of strategic papers. In fact, I would dare say the only strategic papers to DARD on the issues and the solutions that we see going forward. I don't think any other organisation has actually put the same strategy forward, and it is something that we would hope that they do take note of. Maybe Jude, you want to elaborate a little bit more on those?
Yeah, I suppose just to give you my background, I lived and worked in New Zealand for a number of years looking at the removal of subsidies from agriculture and the social impact that had on farmers and farm families. So I'm coming from that background. So I was able to look at models that are operating in other places to make recommendations for rural support going forward. Now, part of the recommendations that we made and that we've already started to introduce was for the organisation to be much more proactive rather than waiting for BSE or foot and mouth outbreak, that we can be there trying to help people earlier on before that problem becomes a crisis. I would like us to be in a position where we had the resources to make policy recommendations, and it's certainly something we'd like to do more of in the future. But we did provide a substantial research report to DARD with recommendations in there.
Do you see all the information that you feed into DARD? Do you ever get back any response?
I suppose it would be fair. No, we are asked for more and more information, and while I fully recognise it's good to identify the issues, because the issues do change. Stresses and issues do change at different time, but we would like to, I suppose, not spend so much of our resource just tabulating issues, actually getting results at ground level. And that's why, back to our volunteers, I suppose that's where we see our remit, is putting people with the 2 ears to listen up and down those lanes. And I suppose while that's where we put our limited resource into volunteers, we would like to see more policy being listened to, let's say, or consulted on, and indeed that these documents don't just go and sit on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, Chair.
Sydney, Anderson,
Just quickly to come back, Sam, you've touched a few times on think you said you have 31 volunteers and you'd like 60 and
Yeah.
you started from 26, you're further. How do you recruit your volunteers to get that broad range of skills across? How do you go about that? Like, I just don't turn up and knock at your door and say, I want to be a volunteer, obviously.
But some of our volunteers have been involved from 10, 12 years ago when the organisation was started. More recently, we've had a volunteer recruitment events. So like the Balmoral Show, for example, we were encouraging people to volunteer with us through the Farm and Press as well. Through Farm Week, Farm Life, we would put articles encouraging people to contact us if they're interested in volunteering. And as Sam says, over the last year, we've increased our volunteers.
There are specific skills you're looking for there as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, it's not just like, you have to get a spread there.
Yeah. So our volunteers, I suppose, there's key skills. Some help with a helpline, so they are trained in helpline work, so they'll take the calls in the evenings and weekends. Others don't feel comfortable with that, but they will go out to agriculture shows and marts and help promote the organisation. And then we have others that do the outreach work, so they tend to be the retired DARD advisors, the farmers who have that technical, practical support. So there is different types of volunteer that we're looking for.
What are the number of volunteers you would like to work with to see it going forward, your group going forward?
Yeah, well, I think if you just look at the geography, and I suppose sometimes I do have to pinch myself and say, yeah, it's 6 counties in Northern Ireland the same size as Cork, if you put it in a geography base there. But when I look at 24 or 5 or 1,000 farm businesses, and I look at the rural environment, and I look at the population, I do believe we're asking too much of 31 volunteers. And we have some of those people, it comes down to their maybe expertise, their counselling skills or their area of expertise. And unfortunately, they are volunteers, and we can't turn them into full-time employees. They're not. And that's where I feel that to double those numbers, to really get most effective, we'd love to be in the top side of 50. And that will give better geographic coverage, but it'll also give a range of skills, because the 31 of them, while we have all of their skills very well honed in on, they're not all capable of doing exactly the same thing. So you may have 31 across 100 miles by 80, but you maybe only have half a dozen that are specialising in a particular expertise, and we'd need to be able to grow that.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, yeah. Thank you.
Well, the last question, what do you see as the difficulties associated with the measurement of rural poverty? Identifying?
I think I did mention earlier just about the hidden poverty that exists there that doesn't always show up in statistics. When you go down to the super output areas that the statistical research is done, very often, there is hidden pockets of rural poverty that just don't show up on any of those statistics. So there has to be something done to really, so that we're not overlooking the poverty that does exist in rural areas.
And that can be a hard topic, because I think it was Tom mentioned there, it's not always the small farmer or the large farmer. Right across the range, you can have issues, and it's getting people just to swallow pride at times and actually share with us the issues that they have in rural poverty, and then start the whole ball rolling. That's the difficult part of it. You will see we get great support from the Agri-Press, the Irish Farmers Journal, Farm Week, Farm and Life, and the local press. I don't think there's one week that we don't have press coverage there, and that's not. We're not able to pay for that. We're not a press funding organisation, no, but we do get a lot of support and so on from them. Right down to DARD direct offices, down to various other people that are going up and down farm range or rural areas. That's where we think we need to put our resource and get the word of mouth that we need. That's the best way of getting our support out to people. Word of mouth.
Okay. Is it possible that the committee could have a copy of the strategic document sent to or the
Certainly, yeah.
we could get a copy of that?
Yeah.
And I'll appreciate that. Can I thank you very much again for your presentation?
Thank you.
And
Thank you very
commend you for the work that you do, especially when you're doing it in a voluntary capacity. It's great to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of my colleagues again, thank you through the chair, William, and to all of your colleagues. You've given us a lot of time, and we very much value that, and we hope we can be in a position to continue to not only provide the support we have over the past 10 or 12 years, but to do that in a much more tangible way going forward. I'd like to train more volunteers and get more one-to-one support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if any of you would like to volunteer to join the board, you're very welcome.
Never miss an opportunity.
I don't think we have a politician on board.
That's why it's doing so well.
The one person we haven't got on board at the moment is, and that I've always been very keen to get, would be a vet, because I often think the vets are out there at the worst of times and see the stress that people are under, but we're working on that. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Agenda item 6, we have an oral briefing from Rivers Agency. The Reservoirs Bill Financial Assistance Scheme and consideration stage. And I refer members to the memo from the clerk at page 138 to 160, and papers from the department are at pages 161 to 184. I can advise members that the proposed amendments put forward by Rivers Agency are for noting. There is no further discussion required.
Chairman, I joked earlier on that I thought I killed that bill off whenever Mr. Brew left.
Can I welcome David Porter and Kieran Brazier? You're very welcome. And I'd ask you to take up to 10 minutes to address the committee, and then we'll ask you a few questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Really, we've only 3 issues, and it's more just an update as to where we are. But I was conscious that there's a few new faces. Do you want a minute or two of context, or do we just get into the business today? I'm easy with either.
Context,
yeah, maybe.
Because I can keep it a minute or two, just because I'm conscious that maybe people are wondering why we're talking about reservoirs, and in particular a reservoir bill. So we have a sort of well-rehearsed history of reservoirs that tells us sort of how we got to where we are in terms of the legislation, which I think is useful because it'll give you some context as to why we feel that this is a priority and why we've done the work that we have. So from an engineering point of view, a water retaining structure is very difficult to build, and that was really proven because of through the Industrial Revolution. Whenever they were starting to construct mills, they wanted then to harness the power of a river, and in order to do that they built a reservoir, and so they got the same builder who built the mill structure to build the reservoir. And unfortunately there was a number of very, very significant failures where people died, and certainly in the late 1800s, in fact many hundreds of people died as a result of dam failures. That then led to a piece of legislation in the early 1930s, the Reservoir Safety Provision, which applied to England and Scotland and Wales, which required an engineer to be in charge of the construction of a reservoir, and also for those structures then to be inspected on a regular basis to make sure that any early warning signs of changes within the reservoir was picked up, and therefore action could be taken so that the people living downstream of the reservoir then wouldn't be harmed. What I've said to you, all of which just applies to England, Scotland and Wales. None of it applied here. And this has been a gap that has been recognised for a number of years. And recently, through the work that we've done on the EU Floods Directive, we identified the risk from reservoirs as being an area that we needed to address. And hence why we brought forward the reservoir bill, and we've taken it through the initial stages, and it has been scrutinised, and now we're going to move forward to the consideration stage and bring it to the floor of the Assembly. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of context just of how we've got to where we are today. As I say, there's really 3 bits of updates that we want to give the committee. Firstly, just about the consideration stage, and really the purpose of that is just so you get the dates for your diaries. Secondly, we want to take you through a number of further amendments and there is only, I think, 3 of them, and they are relatively short. And then finally, I just want to talk about the information gathering and the assistance to reservoir managers, and so those are the 3 areas. So firstly, consideration stage, we currently have penciled in for the 25th of November. And we have penciled in the 8th of December for further consideration stage. Now, those are, as I said, those dates are penciled in at this minute in time because we wanted to clear the committee today and then go to the Minister just to firm up on those dates. But those are the dates that we're proposing at this minute in time, which will allow you to get those into your diary and your work programme. I'm going to ask Kieran to quickly go through the amendments, or the further amendments that we've had since we were last here.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Mr. Chairman. There are 3 new proposed amendments. One removes duplication and makes a minor amendment to one of the clauses. The other provides clarity and makes a further amendment to a minor amendment to a clause. And the third one, which is a wee bit more significant, is around the arrangements for the issue of non-disclosure notices on reservoir managers by the Secretary of State. And I'll cover all 3 of those now. The first one around duplication impacts on clause 107. And that clause is places a requirement on the reservoir manager to notify the department if he were to revoke a contract with an engineer, or if an engineer was to resign from a contract with a reservoir manager. And he must do so within 28 days of that occurring. The clause itself refers to that 28-day stipulation on a number of occasions, and we're just tidying that clause up to make sure that there's an unnecessary reference to the 28-day stipulation in that clause. So that's just to remove that duplication and to tidy that clause up. The second amendment is around clause 117, and again, this is for clarity. At clause 3C of 117, it refers to statutory provision, and this is the amendment, the proposed amendment, makes that clear that what we're referring to there is Northern Ireland legislation or an Act of Parliament. So the bill, as currently introduced, can amend other legislation, be it here in Northern Ireland or an Act of Parliament, and we just want to make it clear that that's what it can do. That's a standard clause in most primary legislation, and we're advised by the Office of the Legislative Council that future primary legislation will be written with that clarity in it. So the bill we're proposing to amend, the bill is introduced in the Assembly to take that on board. The third amendment is around national security, and the bill as currently drafted allows for the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice on a reservoir manager in relation to flood plans or incident reports. And that's where if the Secretary of State feels that it would have an adverse impact, the information contained in an incident report or a flood plan would have an adverse impact on national security, the Secretary of State, that's drawn to the Secretary of State's attention, the Secretary of State can issue a non-disclosure notice and advise the reservoir manager not to disclose that information on the grounds of national security. The bill as currently drafted, as introduced in the Assembly, the process for that is that the Secretary of State would issue a direction on the department, and the department would then issue the non-disclosure notice to the reservoir manager. It came to our attention during the summer. Scotland is currently introducing subordinate legislation to its reservoirs bill, and they showed us a copy and asked us to comment on a copy of an order that they're introducing on this matter. And we noticed that legislation allows for the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice directly on a reservoir manager rather than coming through the Scottish equivalent of our department. And we
asked for advice on this from our solicitor, and we also shared this information with the Northern Ireland office and asked them if they wanted to adopt the arrangements that Scotland are putting in place. And we also noticed that actually the Reservoirs Bill in England allows for the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice directly on a reservoir manager. The Northern Ireland office, in our conversations with them and taking advice on it, advised us that they were content to move to the revised arrangement where the Secretary of State could issue a non-disclosure notice directly on a reservoir manager. And we are proposing to amend the bill to allow that to happen. There's two other things that amendment does. It allows the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice on any other person that might be involved in the development or drafting of an incident report or a flood plan. And it also allows the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice on the department on any other matter that he or she feels might adversely impact on national security with regard to a controlled reservoir. So that's the proposed amendment around that. At the moment, as I say, the Secretary of State, there is provision in the bill at the moment for the Secretary of State to issue a non-disclosure notice. What this is doing is taking the route that would take through the department and onto a reservoir manager, and it would mean that the Secretary of State could move directly and issue that on a reservoir manager.
Okay, and then the final point is just on the information gathering and the assistance. If I can draw your attention, the two big issues that we had through scrutiny was the need for more information, and in particular the need for more information to enable the capital grant scheme or a business case to be done for that. That we weren't able to provide that, and also then if we could then provide assistance to reservoir managers to assist them with the initial requirements of the reservoir bill. So we took that away and started to develop a business case. So I'm going to quickly outline the way that we see it going forward, because we think that we have found a way that can actually satisfy both those issues: one, information gathering, and two, facilitate or provide some assistance to reservoir managers. So initially the department is going to go out and seek to gather information. The information that we seek to gather, or that we need to gather in order to inform a report in order to allow phase 2 to go forward, is the condition of the reservoir and also the cost of bringing it up to standard. So those two issues, condition and cost. So we're going to go out and ask people, we need to find this information. If a reservoir manager already has that information, we will take that information from them to use that within the report. If they can give us that, we will then be happy enough to pay up to a figure of, and the figure we've used in our business case, £2,000, or actuals are up to £2,000. The reason why we're doing that initially is because, if you recall, I said that what we wanted to find a way that recognised those who were prudent. So people who already have that information, who can provide it to the department, we're happy enough to pay for that up to actuals up to a cap of 2,000. If they don't have that information, but can provide it or will undertake to provide it, the same arrangement applies. We will pay up to a cap of £2,000, because that's what we have deemed to be the amount of money it will cost for the department to gather that information. If that second option isn't open to the reservoir manager, or they don't choose to do it, the third option is then the department will go in with their permission and gather that information. Now, the subtle difference is, if we just go in to gather that information ourselves, the purpose for us to go in to do that is just to determine the condition and the cost in order to inform the report. The first two options, the benefit of the reservoir manager taking either the first two options, either they have an inspection report or they will undertake to do an inspection report. If they do that themselves with our financial assistance, they will be compliant with the reservoir bill from day one. So that's the benefit of them working with us in order to draw down that money. But if they're not happy to do it, they don't want to do it, they want to wait until the reservoir bill come in, we will still seek the permission to enter from them, and we will gather the base information just so that we have as complete a report or complete a picture as we possibly can on the condition and cost of bringing reservoirs up to standard. So those are 3 items: consideration stage, further amendments, and then the information gathering and financial assistance. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. The committee over a period of time has been concerned that the Rivers Agency did not know the condition of a lot of reservoirs in Northern Ireland. And we're happy to see that an audit now is progressing, but the Rivers Agency has a poor track record in engaging with the private sector owners of reservoirs. How do you intend to address this?
Well, I think the scheme that I've outlined has clear benefits for the individual owners. That if they engage with us, they will actually get that financial help to help them with that initial stage. So if they're clever about it and engage with us, well then they will actually get a clear benefit. So we've developed a scheme that will encourage them to engage with us. But in addition to that, we recognise that we need to do something to make sure reservoir managers understand what that benefit is. So we're going to do 2 things in that. One, we're going to talk to the industry through Institution of Civil Engineers, make sure that the actual engineers that are going to be doing that work understand how this will this could be taken forward for the benefit of reservoir managers. And secondly, our own staff then will engage with reservoir managers to make sure that they understand that there's an opportunity here to draw down some money. It's time bound and it's to their benefit to do that, and we recognise we have a bit of work to do in order that reservoir managers recognise that.
Okay. A concern for many of us and myself from day one on this issue, I felt that right at the initial start, that should have happened, early on in the process, and then Rivers Agency would be coming from a position of strength and know exactly how the reservoirs stand. One of the big issues for the committee also is the money that is going to be available to repair reservoirs, and that's one of the reasons that we want an audit to see exactly what that repair bill would be. On a small number of reservoirs, probably that repair bill could be extensive.
Oh yeah.
Do you feel that, given the difficult financial circumstances we find ourselves in Northern Ireland, that the likelihood of government funding the assistance for this?
Yeah. Well, the beauty about it is you're not agreeing to Phase 2 at this minute in time. Phase 2 will be on the statute books, but we have a phased commencement. And Phase 2 can only commence whenever we bring back a report that says, here's the condition of the reservoirs. So in essence, by agreeing to the bill as it stands at this minute in time, we're not committing to Phase 2. Phase 2 still needs to be commenced, and it still needs to go through the floor of the House in order to be commenced. So whilst it's on the statute book, the place where the power is to switch on that or to commence that Phase 2 still rests with the House here. So I think we did listen to that, and that was the way that we felt we could reasonably address it.
Okay, we have Joe Byrne.
Chairman, in relation to the audit report, has that been concluded, and has any quantum estimate been done on any capital money that will be required to bring those that are maybe not up to standard to sufficient standards?
Okay, what we've been focusing on is the business case to allow us to do the audit and to find a way that we, the department, got what it's needed, but also there was the opportunity for reservoir managers to avail of that in order to carry out their inspection reports. So at this minute in time, we're not in a position to put forward a capital cost of those, but we will be able to do that before Phase 2 commences. So at some point in the future, probably realistically, probably a year or 18 months from now, to allow the reservoir managers a reasonable time actually to provide us with that information, for us to digest it and to put it into a report and then bring it back to you. But as I said earlier to the chairman, At that point, that's whenever phase 2 would commence. Only after we've been able to say, here is the size of the problem. Either it's a small problem because of the small number of reservoirs that we're concerned about, or this is a huge problem and we actually need to sit down and fundamentally rethink how we're actually going to address that in terms of the capital investment.
Okay.
Chairman, just the only point I would make is, given the uncertainty that some private reservoir owners have, I think it would have been better if there could have been a comprehensive audit done, a comprehensive assessment done on all reservoirs, so that people would know exactly what was in front of them, cost-wise or otherwise, and they could make decisions. Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oliver McMullen.
Mr. Chair, and thanks for your presentation. I suppose what you're saying there, you need this permission now to carry on to the next stage to prepare the audit.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense there it's important. But is there anything in there that states that the department sets the rates and not the engineers?
Again, we did bring in amendments to increase our power in terms of not only looking at the quality of the outputs from an engineer, but also we undertook that there would be some overview of cost as well. So that is one of the amendments that will be taken to the floor of the House whenever the bill is put forward for consideration stage.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a number of you members in the committee that mightn't fully up to speed with part of it. I have another question. In discussing the risk designation process with the committee last June, you indicated that the Rivers Agency was commencing a new flood maps. This would allow porosity and depth of water from the reservoir to be more acutely mapped. This in turn would assist with the designation process. Can you bring us up to date on where you are with this?
I can do. That contract has been let and that work has commenced, and it is to be delivered at the early part of the new year, but the contract is let and that work has started.
Okay. No?
Yeah, we want
That's okay.
just want to ask Chair, all right?
No, okay. Well, then,
No, the 6 that are unknown, no, the ownership of them are unknown at present, right? If that stays the case, then who takes on the responsibility of those? You know, who takes on the management of it, if you like?
Yeah.
Is it council? Is it
No, it's not council. So
Yard?
Yeah.
Is it the What Rivers Agency?
Yeah, so there's two issues here. There's the responsibility overall for it, or the ownership of it overall, and then there's what we class as matters in the interest of public safety.
Yeah.
So if we get to the end of this process of trying to work out the condition of them and still haven't determined who owns them, well then there are emergency powers within the bill, and also then powers for us to step in to carry out works in the interest of public safety. Now that doesn't mean that we take ownership of it. It just means that we address any of the major concerns, the things which could potentially cause harm, so that we can leave the structure in a relatively safe condition. And there are some cases where that may well mean that on a recurring basis we actually have to go in and carry out inspections or commission inspections until such times as we actually can determine who owns that. You heard whenever I was giving evidence, they use this term in England called orphaned reservoirs. And so that's sort of what we're talking about here, a reservoir that nobody actually owns. So because we're doing this in the interest of public safety, there are provisions to allow us to go in and to address those emergency or significant issues and not necessarily take ownership of it.
Yeah. And Chair, just on that, are any of those 6 high risk?
Yes, and we've reduced the number to 2. It's not 6 any longer. It's been reduced to, I think, 2. I can clarify that for you. I can come back to you on that. And I'll confirm the risk designation on those as well.
And just, would it be your belief there that maybe the ownership of these here are unknown because of the expense that may be?
No.
If they're in a bad state.
It goes back beyond the reservoirs bill. We've been gathering information on ownership for quite a long time. So I don't think it's any association with the reservoirs bill.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
okay. At this moment in time, have you a time frame for the full audit to be complete?
We're writing the business case on the basis that we will have a time-bound scheme, because we think that will encourage the maximum drawdown of that money, to either to provide us information or to allow us to do it. We think that probably 12 months, but possibly 18 months seems to be a reasonable time to do that. And that then also will fit in with the introduction of phase 1, achieving, getting the bill through the Assembly by the early part of next year, and then getting a commencement order for phase 1. So those two timescales sort of marry up quite nicely, which then would allow us to be in a position then to come back to you with a report on the justification for phase 2.
Is it not a case of putting the cart before the horse? Should that, personal view again is that audit should have been done earlier and at the start, and then we know exactly how we're standing. The other way around.
Yeah. Well, there's sufficient information on the impact, and it was the impacts that we took to the executive to seek approval to the start of this process. So the Minister and the executive were content that the impacts were such that we needed to really address the likelihood element of it, which is the information we need from the reservoir managers. In some respect, we are where we are. I can't bring us back and restart the process, and that's why we accepted that there was a difference of opinion, and the way that we felt was best to deal with that was by phasing the commencement of the bill. Phase 1 brought in the requirement for an inspection. It clarified who the reservoir manager is, and it defines what a reservoir is. But it doesn't commence any of the recurring nature, the bits that we were really concerned about putting the burden on people without actually being well informed about the potential cost. So it's only that phase 1 that we're commencing, and that allows us to not have to go back to the start, that we can actually take it from here and satisfy, I think, both the requirements to have a reservoir bill in, to clarify who's responsible, but also to get the report on the condition of reservoirs before we actually start that recurring element of the bill.
Yeah, I would have thought that it was much simpler for the department to do the audit, and complete that audit. But that's a personal view. Tom Buchanan.
Just to refresh our memories again on this, the audit's complete, and there's works identified at a reservoir that needs to be done. The farmer doesn't have the money to do it. Is there sufficient grant? Is there a grant scheme tied into this, or is there going to be sufficient grant to allow that works to be completed?
Right. So the two aspects of that. Within the bill, there's the power for us to bring forward a grant scheme. So, and if we just draw your attention to the fact that what we're doing is that we are bringing forward a piece of primary legislation that we have to make sure that the powers are there. So the power is in the bill, so that will, at least that is a possibility. Whether there is going to be a grant scheme is a question that we can only answer after we get further down the road. Whenever we know what the quantum of it is, whether we can write a business case that says this is a good idea, and whether it's viable, and whether it's cost beneficial, and whether it's in the interest of the wider public, and also whether it's affordable. We don't actually have to write that report for another year or 18 months until we are actually informed. But again, you're not curtailing any future decision, because phase 2 doesn't start until we actually get that report written, until we actually bring that back to you and say, here's the condition of these reservoirs. Are you therefore content to bring the commencement order for phase 2?
Importantly, the emergency powers that we have, that David alluded to earlier, about going in and making sure that a reservoir didn't fail and that people weren't injured, exists and will be in phase 1. So we can do that if we found that the audit was telling us that there are some very dangerous reservoirs out there that people don't have the money and can't afford to fix, and we felt that the emergency works were required. The bill makes provision for us to step in and do that, whereas at the moment we don't have any legislative powers to do that.
Yeah. Given the financial climate we're living in, the possibility is that any work that's identified at any of these reservoirs that's publicly owned or that's privately owned, that the owner will probably not have the money to do the works that has to be that's required to be done.
Okay.
Okay.
Chair, just to back that and say, one of the new members here, so what Tom's saying there, if it's identified that a private reservoir needs major work carried out, is there any guarantee that that's going to be covered by the department, or is it going to be the person, the owner, being forced to do that? Well, do we know at this stage of what the proposals are down the line?
Well, we know at this minute in time that a reservoir manager or reservoir owner is today responsible for that. So this isn't, that fundamental responsibility isn't changing by this piece of primary legislation. The difficulty that has been identified
can be
is...
enforced then if it goes through on the phase 1 that you're talking about? Is that what you're saying?
It can't be forced in phase 1.
No.
No.
If a reservoir manager gets his reservoir inspected and the inspection report says that there's a huge amount of work needs to be done to it to make it safe, that part of enforcing that and requiring him to act upon that is in phase 2 of the bill. So that would only be considered, the commencement of that would only be considered when this audit report is presented to the House for consideration.
And would the finance then be judged at that stage?
Yes.
In the second stage
Yes.
of the House? Will
Yes.
it will all come into play in relation
Yes.
to the amount, the maximum, or the
Yes.
set for amount of work we need to be carried out?
Yes.
There?
That's correct.
Would then be
Yes.
considered in phase 2? Phase 2?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why we have phase 1 and phase 2, for that very reason.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Just decent. Spritz isn't You're all right, Wally, you have no reservoirs.
Thank goodness.
Chairman, it might be good if we could take a couple of minutes just to review where we are with this bill, otherwise, and the next, some of us still have about the sequencing of
No, that's
events.
I had down for the 11th of November. So do you want me just to cover that wee bit first?
Yeah, well, if you could give us just some gauge at this stage, because
Of the time scale and stuff, yeah. Okay, do you want me to just cover that?
That's okay.
Yeah, members, just for clarity, the Rivers Agency have indicated that the consideration stage will be on Tuesday, the 25th of November. Now, they are reckoning that'll take either all day. It's simply because of the size of the bill and the amount of the amendments. There's over 250 amendments that this committee sought and is now going to get.
All night again.
And it could be a long one.
Today was bad.
And even just the time scale and reading it out. So there's two aspects to that. The first one, and to cover that one first, is that I had provisionally written into the forward work programme for the 11th of November in a closed session. It'll probably take over an hour. Take this committee through it's what the decisions it was what all the amendments will be, where they're going to fall. We're going to put it right out for you and all the rest, so you know where each vote is. But there's two areas where you still have a bit of decision making to do. So, and I put in that in closed session for the 11th of November. Rather than, leave it to the 18th, we would initially thought we'd do it on the 18th, the week before the consideration stage, but it may take more than that, so that's why I've given myself a week. We'll do it on the 11th of November. It's going to be a long session. It's going to be probably quite a boring session because I'm going to have to take you through it, but I think it probably needs to be done, if that's okay. And then the second decision to look at... Well, I'd be able to tell you what the committee decision was. You had agreed these amendments, you hadn't agreed these amendments, so you at least know where you're coming from, how to vote, or at least a guide to how you want to vote when you go through the lobbies. What you do is up to yourself. And then the consideration stage is going to be on Tuesday the 5th of November, which is a committee day, and they're saying it's going to take most of that day, so I'm suggesting that we don't have a meeting that day, because you'll be in the chamber. I think I have already made that day light, so that I could, if necessary, cancel it and move the sessions elsewhere. So are you content with that?
Content.
Chairman, I'm glad of the update, and I think it would be great if we could apply our minds to having an economical way of maybe through the process rather than prolonging this agony whenever it gets into the chamber, because yesterday there was a 3-letter word yesterday, it was killed it many times. People are bored, isn't it?
And maybe on the 11th, I mean, I will obviously keep the chairperson will keep his own speech as concise as possible, but even just the reading out of the amendments is going to take time in the chamber. That's where most of the time I'm told is going to come from. So,
excuse me, did you say the 5th of November?
The 5th. 25th of November.
For the formal.
Yeah, for the consideration stage, it's a Tuesday, yeah.
But on the 11th, we're going to have a private meeting to go through all
yes, and part of your committee session, we'll do it in closed session. And if I could ask that, if you wouldn't mind going back over and reading the committee report, so you know what the committee decision is. But I'm also very happy to take time out and take the 4 new members and spend an hour with them separately outside the meeting, and just go through so that there's a bit of understanding. If you've read the report, I can do that with you, take you through it, and
there is some concern among some members, and we have had it for some time, that we don't want it to be too erroneous on some of the owners of reservoirs that are not, we wouldn't really, as farmers, maybe we wouldn't call them reservoirs, just small earth banks, and that, I think they will fall out of the loop, but we need to be certain that there's no big issues there. I have some concerns about a reservoir where there's a massive wall dam is a completely different situation. There's some small, they're called reservoirs, but in fact they're very small. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Okay.
People are prepared for that. It's going to be a bit like pulling hen's teeth, but we'll get through it.
Have all these reservoirs been identified?
151 reservoirs have been identified. We know, but there's
Chair, you were saying some of them maybe not would be classified, but like earth banks are.
That's why this I suppose will identify.
An earth bank is still a reservoir. People think of a reservoir as a big concrete like Alga Dam or something, but for a lot of these reservoirs most of them, and this is probably why why Rivers Agency think they're so dangerous. This is the kind of thing I can go over with you separately if you want. Are earth banks, or they're
But Stella, those
earth dams.
identified reservoirs set in stone now. That's good.
Yeah.
They are identified. That's what we're dealing with. There's no getting out of that.
151 of them, yeah.
That's nothing's done. They're clay.
No,
Yeah.
they're not. They're clay bank, exactly. Clay banks.
That's good.
They've been there for 100 years, maybe.
So
Some of them have been there for 2 or 3. Some of them have been there so long that people thought they were just natural lakes in the environment. They didn't realise that they were a dam. And that was one of the big issues that came out from the private sector. They thought that it had been there in their land, it was just a lake, it had been there for so long, they never thought of it as anything else other than a lake. So, but it's not a lake. Yeah. And one of the big issues too, and we don't know, it was a bit of, I don't know what to call it, but Camlock Lake is a reservoir that is failing and is going to cost over £2 million to repair. That was one of the big ones that came out. And
Who owns
we know
it? Who owns it?
The trustees are all there.
that was part of the problem. 3 or 4 different owners.
The Newry Council have some residual.
They withdraw water from it, don't they?
Yeah, Northern Ireland Water take water from it. There was a trustees who were set up to manage it when it was developed, and the trustees have all died, and it never seemed to pass anywhere else. So, but the committee's main concern was that they were able to tell us about Camlock, but they couldn't tell us about the other 150. That information wasn't there.
That's why I felt that an audit should have been done before, initially at the very start.
I mean, I'm very happy for the 4 new members to take time out when we come back after recess, because we'll be in Scotland the rest of this week, and talk you through the bill if you want. just give me a shout at the end of the meeting and I'll organise that for you. And then we'll go do it in closed session on the 11th.
Maybe we'll come back a day next week.
No.
Will delegate you come to do that?
I take it only one of the chairman sits in for all the new members.
Go on.
Okay.
Right for the end.
So are you happy enough with the arrangements, or do you want different arrangements, or do you think we'll need more arrangements?
But yeah, the arrangements seem reasonable for now.
For now,
Reasonable for now,
anyway.
yeah.
We have to look at some modus operandi.
Well, I mean, again, on the 11th, if you want to talk about, not all of you maybe need to speak on every, you can maybe divide it up between you, so you don't have everybody speaking on every part. Ian, sorry?
Will it be grouped at that stage?
You're leading on this.
We don't know, we won't know how the amendments will be grouped probably until the Thursday before the 25th, whatever date that is. 19th, 20th.
There's only
So
three.
we won't know the groups until then. But, I mean, again, if you want, we can come back on the 11th, we can provisionally allocate 7, if that's one of the things we want to discuss, that each of you take the chairperson, but then everybody else takes one group rather than everybody speaking on every.
Yeah, you got to
You can think about that, but it'll take some of the time out of it. But that's
everybody saying the same thing.
No.
it's up to yourselves. There's 2 areas that are going to be more contentious, and it'll be up to you to decide how you want to move those forward. Maybe even leave maybe in more than an hour on the 11th of November to do this discussion. But so that'll be a long meeting. Do you want to start at 1 o'clock on the 11th? That's going to be a long meeting, that one, 11th of November. Do you want to start at 1 o'clock rather than 1:30, or just want to work late?
Start at 1.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock? Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I notice here that I have to advise members
I've
that
done all that.
you've done that, but it isn't. Why I'm asking that question is.
Oh, that one there, yeah.
Yeah, that one there. Can I advise members that what was originally referred to as a financial assistance package for reservoir owners is now referred to as a reservoirs audit? Now, in my eyes, them two things don't mean the same thing.
It's just a. Yeah.
Is it? I mean, if one's a financial assistance package, the other's an audit. I just.
Yeah.
Is it okay? You're clear on that? You're clear.
I'm clear anyway. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Fine, man. Agenda item 7, or our briefing on the Scottish visit. Before we hear from the search officer, I'd like to ask the clerk to outline the practical details of the Scottish visit to members.
Okay. So for those, there's 4 members now going on the Scottish visit, and Mark has the visit pack for you before you leave. There's a taxi will be here at Parliament Buildings at 6:45 tomorrow morning to take us to the airport, for our half-8 flight out of Belfast City Airport. So when we get to the airport, I have a bag to check in with the committee, with the guests, with the people who are offering us hospitalities. But the rest of you just go straight through security, with your boarding passes, and I'll meet you upstairs. We'll have breakfast there before the flight. Wednesday morning, we will be meeting with NFU Scotland, Quality Meat Scotland, and we're having lunch with them as well at their premises. Wednesday afternoon, we're going to Roslin University to talk about the whole genetics and breeding aspect of things. Then we go to the hotel and we will have dinners booked for 7:30, so that'll be tomorrow night. And then Thursday morning, we have the farm visit to the farmer who received the large capital grant for the Farm Business Investment Scheme. It's, in this case, it was for a dairy parlour, so that's about an hour's drive out of Edinburgh. So we'll go there, meet the farmer, and then we'll just go to and see round his premises, discuss the pros and cons of a large capital scheme with him, and then back into a local hotel where we'll meet the officials who manage that grant programme, so we can hear the pros and cons from the official side, and then back to Edinburgh Airport for a flight home at 4 o'clock to get you back here for around about, back into Belfast for 5, so she'll be back up here Parliament Buildings for 5:30 at the latest. Flights all being on time and things like that. Okay. Mark, Alan has your travel pack, and Mark O'Hare's your travel pack, and Mark Allen's going to.
Really, Mark's.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose just want to go through very quickly. You have 4 briefing papers, 3 in your pack and 1 in the additional papers. So I just want to give a very quick overview on the R briefing notes, but I suppose they're designed to give you a bit of background before we actually head tomorrow. And the first one, really looking at overview of coupled beef support, that's pages 186 to 189 in your pack, if you want to look at them, the electronic ones. Very quickly, I suppose, won't be news to many of you in the table again. 2003, CAP reform really effectively led to decoupling of income support from production. So at that point, effectively, the EU took a step away, but they were aware of the fact that there were particular sectors and particular regions and countries who were concerned about the viability of particular sectors. I suppose the Scots at that point were very clear and said, look, we need to have a protection for our beef sector. It's a significant part of our economy. As you can see, they're actually very significant. It's talked about beef's at the heart of Scottish agriculture. Output in 2013 of 825 million, 12,000 holdings, drawing some income from beef enterprise. So you can see why they were keen to protect it. What they actually did then post-2003 is set out on Table 1 that I have in the paper, and you can see there, I really just give an overview of the schemes that ran. The first one was the Scottish Beef Calf scheme, which ran from 2005 to 11. There's a bit of background there in terms of qualifying criteria, available support. In blunt terms, what it boiled down to, the 2010 payment rate, and this varies, I suppose, depending on the strength of the euro, but at that time, as an average, was about €125, which was £104 for the first 10 animals. And then it dropped down after that to about £52.19 per animal. So significant support. At that point in time, in 2005-11, you can see the 2005 figures there, about 8,500 farm businesses benefited. The successor scheme to that then, which is just actually coming now to a close, which is the Scottish Beef Scheme, that ran from 2011 to 14. Very similar criteria, and again, there's an advance payment for the first 10 eligible calves. It's a higher payment. That, I suppose, taking the 2013 figure, has worked out £139.20 per animal. And then thereafter, once you go outside the 10, it drops down to £46.40. Total scheme budget of about €29.8 million. So a significant contribution. And again, in terms of producers who benefited, 2013 was 7,500. Looking forward, there's not a lot of detail at this point. What we can say is that the Scots are keen to continue with a coupled beef support, unlike ourselves at this point. The actual details are a bit scant. It's probably likely to have very similar elements to the previous 2 schemes that I talked about. Key things being there, it'll be for calves with 75% plus beef genetics, which are born in Scottish holdings. So it's not really going to benefit dairy in that regard. They're predominantly going to be beef cattle. The other thing to look at there too is interesting is the Scots are actually thinking and have agreed as well to bring in a scheme for sheep. And coupled support as well, a recognition there are issues there. In terms of figures of support, it's quite hard to say, but at this point there are indicative information that we have which suggests that we're maybe looking at about €100 per calf for mainland producers and €160 per calf for Highlands and Islands. So, but again, I would caution those figures are very much provisional. Details of schemes are being worked out. Very quickly then, in terms of the impact, and this is maybe where coupled support becomes a bit cloudy in terms of the impact that it has had, because you can see there, I've stuck in a number of figures there, really looking at 2 things. Total cattle numbers and the numbers of total beef calves, that's male and female, aged under 1. And the trend for both of those has been downwards. So despite coupled support, we effectively have still seen a reduction in Scottish beef cattle numbers. As to why that has happened, I mean, there are different opinions, there's different assessments. The only real thing that I could find in terms of the actual assessment of the schemes that have been in place was work that the Scottish Government commissioned in June 2008, and it drew a number of conclusions. The first one, this was the Scottish Beef Calf Scheme. It had failed, they acknowledged it had failed to reverse the downward trend. They were also recognising the fact that despite the beef calf scheme, it didn't offer enough support for farm businesses to meet their fixed costs, which I know again is an issue which we have touched upon a number of times in this committee. And the conclusion they drew on that really effectively, the fourth bullet point down there, is it's unlikely to be effective on its own in retaining beef cattle in the long run. So the actual value of it, and I didn't put the figure in, I looked at it just as I went back before I presented this, was they reckoned that the Scottish Beef Calf Scheme was worth about £3,000 per herd. But when you were looking at in 2000, this is 2005, 2008 data, losses at that point were in the region of £22,000 for a beef farm. And with the scheme, that was with the scheme. So without the scheme, the losses were 25 grand. So the fundamental is it was making things better, but it wasn't addressing the key economic issue, which is that beef is struggling in terms of productivity, which is why, and maybe tomorrow I think we will maybe get a chance to hear from, particularly maybe Quality Meat Scotland, in relation to their Beef 2020 and their vision for the industry and where it goes. And the emphasis there is very much around sustainable beef production. That's all I really have on that one. I appreciate this is a run through, but I'm happy to take any questions or now, or do you want me to hold to the end or carry on? Okay. Second paper then, this is pages 190 to 194. It's really looking at basically the overview of bovine TB-free status in Scotland. That status has been held by Scotland since 2009. Scotland's the only part of the UK to hold and maintain that status. So it's unique, and I suppose an interesting opportunity to go and visit. It's set out there in terms of what you actually need to meet officially TB-free status as defined in European law. It's at least 99.9% of the herds must have been or remained TB-free for at least 6 consecutive years. You can have residual levels of disease, but it has to be less than 0.1% of herds experiencing the infection annually. So what I have done is I have provided you some information there in terms of the TB incidence figures, herd incidence figures. But as I show you that, I have to caution in terms of how comparable this data is, because any of you who were on the committee the last time we had looked at this was an issue that we ran into some difficulties on our side of the house, the research side, because statistics are collected in different ways, and what initially at the headline level appears comparable is often not. What I have tried to do in this, and I actually consulted a number of people on it with the background in the disease and how it's measured, the statistics, I've tried to compare the best I can between the GB, Northern Ireland collection of statistics. So you can see there, I mean, Scotland stands out in UK terms very clearly. It's 0.07%. That's the herd instance figure for 2013. Northern Ireland's, ours is running 6.44. I suppose what I could have looked at here was trends analysis, which a lot of the epidemiologists say is more significant, but I was conscious of the fact you wanted a short paper, but it could be an issue again we can revisit, although we've done this quite a few times. Happy to revisit it, however. I suppose very quickly then on historic incidents of bovine TB in Scotland. The last time we looked at this, we were unable to find any actual evidence as to what happened with TB historically. But this time I actually looked a bit deeper and was able to actually to find a paper from just the latter part of 2013. It wasn't actually available to us the last time, which actually looked at and mapped out where TB existed in GB, and that's effectively the two maps that I have there for you. You can see there, figure 1, that shows the results of tuberculin testing in 1938 by government vets. What's obvious from it, I suppose, is that there are very clearly concentrations in central and northeast Scotland. They're amongst the highest in the country. The map alongside that jumps to 2010, which is confirmed cattle breakdowns. So disease, effectively, the profile of it changed markedly. It's now the southwest of England and Wales where TB is concentrated. Scotland, with the exception of a number of dots, is virtually TB free. I suppose the question then comes, why is that the case? And that's, I suppose, was the difficulties run into, and I have been unable to find, and I think other people have, any actual research which has been able to definitively draw any conclusions. What we can say, and I think the researchers who prepared those maps and the comparative data, they drew attention to maybe factors like farm practice, herd sizes, cattle densities, increased cattle movement, badger group sizes, and maybe even, I think this is one that is interesting as well to touch upon, possibility that bovine TB and badgers could be spillover rather than endemic. So it actually has a limited life. So you're not looking at badger populations having TB for decades. It can be relatively short. So if the disease is managed to effectively be removed, or that it actually may lend itself to be establishing TB-free status. But I have to say the data that looked at doesn't enable you to draw any robust conclusions. But it is interesting nonetheless that the disease profile has changed. The only other really part in this paper then really compares and contrasts how the Scots maintain their officially TB-free status as compared to the controls that we have. I don't want to go into great detail on this now because I'm conscious of time. A couple of things on herd testing. They have routine herd testing at 4-year intervals. Ours is annual. They have, since 2012...
Sorry, can I just ask on that? Yes. Sorry, it's all right.
Okay.
What type of test do they use?
It's against tuberculin. Now, if they receive positive, it's my understanding again.
So it's just the injection that they use?
Yes, skin test. Skin test. Which again, I think, off the top of my head, I think it's similar to ours. If you get a negative or a positive skin test, maybe a repeat skin test or a serological blood test. Since 2012, they've actually even had the option, they've had low-risk herds who've been able to opt out of routine testing. Now, again, they're fairly stringent criteria, but these again are things you maybe might want to touch upon tomorrow. The other things are supposed to be a low-risk herd I've stuck in there. You have to have herds with fewer than 20 cattle, which have had fewer than 2 consignments of cattle moved on from high-incidence TB areas. What they define as high-incidence TB areas are Northern Ireland, the Republic, and certain parts of GB, particularly the southwest of England. Herds that slaughter more than 25% of their stock annually have had fewer than 2 consignments, and herds that slaughter more than 40% of their stock annually. But I suppose a key one for us there is the number of animal movements. It shows you, I think, as we've touched upon a number of times here, that a lot of the Scottish herds are quite isolated. They're not experiencing the level of cattle movement that our own herds would experience. It's an interesting thing to look at. The other thing I stuck in there in the table there are the movement controls. And if you can look there, you can see any cattle coming to Scotland from a high incidence area within England or Wales is subject to annual routine herd testing. So any animal that comes in, still effectively it's marked as it's English or Welsh and it's tested accordingly. It's not an indigenous Scottish animal, it's different. The other thing I suppose to flag maybe there is that post-movement testing in Scotland. They're required for cattle moving to Scotland from high incidence area in England or Wales no fewer than 60 days and no more than 120 days after their arrival. It also applies to cattle from Northern Ireland, Scotland, or from Northern Ireland, sorry, and from the Republic. And cattle from the Republic are restricted at their first destination pending a clear 60-day import test. So it just gives you a flavour. But I think I wanted just to paint the herd testing one's highly significant, but I suppose the thing to remember again is because of Scotland's TB-free status, their control measures are not as stringent as our own because, as I very clearly stated, the disease is a bigger issue for us in terms of herd incidence. That's all I want to say on that one at this point. But again, if anybody, even in the airport, I'll bring stuff with me tomorrow, conversation, whatever, happy to have. The third one, very quickly then, and this was just an overview of Scottish farm investment schemes as requested by the committee. Really what I've tried to do here is set out some of the actual capital support schemes that have been available to farmers in Scotland over recent years. I have to say the focus has really been on 3 areas. The 2007-13 Rural Development Programme in Scotland, the 2014-20 programme going forward, but also one element which was that the Scottish Executive did develop and independently support a scheme known as the Farm Business Development Scheme. That is now closed, but I have it in here as well. I'm not claiming this is a comprehensive picture, it's very much a run through, but without further ado, if you turn to table 1 there, if you look at it, I think actually one of the projects you're visiting tomorrow falls within, or on Thursday, the dairy farm falls within the first one that we're looking at, which is the Rural Development Contracts Rural Priorities Programme. That was open really to individual businesses and properly constituted groups. There are up to 75 funding options. Now, I have listed some of them there. I think the one that we're actually going to be visiting touches upon a number of these, particularly in relation to manure and slurry storage. But there's equally elements you can see there for treatment of slurry, setting up young farmers, restoration of wetland, hedge extension, upgrading infrastructure, renewable energy, a wide range of things. And funding there was capped at £100,000 generally, and there were different funding rates. So you could effectively, as I think the project we're going to visit at a total budget, I think, was over 200,000. But again, just the contribution at 50% being the 100 grand, if it was within LFA, and then it dropped down to 40% within non-LFA. There was also Crofton counties, and again, I suppose this is very exclusive to Highlands and Islands. There was a range of capital provisions provided there. That effectively really was a maximum grant up to £25,000 per individual business or per individual crofter, and that again had a rate at 50% if it was within LFA, 40% was non-LFA. So the details are there. There was also in the 2017 to 13 programme a food processing, marketing and cooperation grant scheme. I know it's more about food processing, but there were farmers, obviously, as within Northern Ireland as well, who took the opportunity to develop a product, and there were capital grant support there. I wasn't actually able to find the actual total or caps on that, because there were a lot of variation in terms of type of support that was afforded, but that might be one that you might want to hear more about. In terms of the standalone schemes, I mentioned the Farm Business Development Scheme. It was really eligible for farmers who operated a farm business, and it covered all areas of Scotland outside the Highlands and Islands. And there were two real, I suppose, broad themes. You could get funding for diversification elements or for investments in agricultural holdings. And you could see the wide range of things there, from alternative agricultural production, residential letting, right through to livestock accommodation, storage sheds. The maximum grant there was for £30,000. But you could equally, if you were part of a collaborative project, get up to 35,000, and the similar rates, 50,000 for LFA, 50% for LFA, 40% for non-LFA. So again, you're looking there, particularly in a collaborative project, could have been anything up to a value of £70,000. Final one then I just want to touch upon is the future programme, and I suppose it's interesting just to look even compared to our own. There are elements again of capital support and provision within the Scottish programme. The Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, again, we don't have measure details here, but there are provisions there for capital work for environmental purposes. 10 million of that will be for slurry stores, and 6 million for footpaths and other works to support access management. Equally, when you go over to some of the others, there's the new entrance support. Again, support there to enable new entrants to farm and to access capital funding to improve their business. A small farm support scheme. Again, not a lot of detail there, but all we know is the headline figure at £6 million. Equally, broadband support, £9 million. There's a LEADER programme as well, and I suppose different to ours, that even within LEADER, there's provision for £10 million for farm and croft diversification. So farmers effectively in Scotland will be able to apply to the future LEADER. So that's, and the other one I suppose is we touched upon earlier, the beef package. 32.5 million available there for improving the genetic resilience of Scotland's beef herd. That's all I want to say probably on that one, unless there's any questions on that one. Okay. I'll move on to the fourth and final, which is really looking at the beef.
Table paper.
Yes, table paper, sorry. And this was just an overview of the beef carcass classification systems used in Northern Ireland and Scotland. I suppose a bit of background on this, we're effectively bound in Scotland and Northern Ireland by EU regulation, which really sets out the classification system that we have to utilise in relation to beef carcass. In blunt terms, the European regulation really could lead to up to 30 potential grades. This is the SUROP system that I'm sure many of you are maybe are aware of, have heard of before. Within that system, however, there are particular elements which apply within particular member states or even particular territory within the member states. So Scotland actually is, along with the rest of GB, has a slightly different version than we have, and I'll come on to that now. In simple terms, the Scots have 56 potential grades for beef carcass. In terms of how assessment is done, it's only done by video imaging analysis in one meat plant in Scotland at this point. The majority of inspection and assessment is done by inspectors. Now that is, I have to say, it's an issue for the Scots. The Beef 2020 report I highlighted earlier, that's one of the things that they actually flag up as a recommendation, that they would like to move towards more video imaging analysis in a point of view of in terms of the challenge around improving their product, improving the standardisation of it, and I suppose the marketability and export potential of it. In Northern Ireland, the LMC obviously have the role to play here. With the grid that we have 225 potential grades for an adult bovine carcass.
Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Now, I suppose There are inspect grades, as many members will be aware as well, for steers and heifers within a smaller band of those 225 potential grades. I suppose to qualify for those, you need to have particular weight, particular age, you need to be part of the Farm Quality Assurance Scheme, and it needs to be obviously country of origin UK, which I suppose the nomad issue as well has presented a few problems ongoing. I suppose the big difference with us in Scotland is that the majority of our beef is assessed by video imaging analysis. We only have 3 of our smaller plants who don't rely on VIA, and to my best of my knowledge, this is the LMC were able to confirm this to me this morning, hence the reason I was late submitting the paper. Only Ballymena, Oakdale and Lakeview still perform inspections by staff. The other major meat plants who take up most of the actual product are using VIA, video image analysis. So that's a very simple overview. I've put the grids in there, it gives you an idea as to how we actually look at it, but I'm sure Quality Meat Scotland tomorrow will be able to go through. But as I say, that it is interesting to talk, I suppose, that looking at the recommendation that they are maybe moving towards video image analysis, which may well mean that the number of grades may increase. I can't say definitively, but
it's a question we can ask. Yeah,
it could be an area of interest. That's all of those covered, members, but I'm happy to take any questions or clarification.
Any questions?
One question. It was interesting to hear you saying that their security is not as stringent as theirs for TV.
I wouldn't say it's maybe the element I picked up on were effectively 2 elements around herd testing and movement control, but the Scots would put a big emphasis on biosecurity controls as well. So I didn't put in the table, but their biosecurity would be comparable to ours. So they are keen to ensure that they're, I mean, it's things like protection of feeders. It is like in terms of trying to ensure that water troughs aren't accessible. There is an emphasis as well, like we want to ensure that you're not exposing animals. Where possible, try and ensure that animals aren't coming into contact with other cattle on a neighbouring farm. So it's not as, I don't want to give the impression it's lax. I think that the situation is that they're starting at a point where they have a far lower disease incidence than we have, but they're also acutely aware that they want to maintain that, and biosecurity is an integral part and a key part for them to maintain it.
Okay. Tom?
Chair, thanks. And along the very same vein, Mark, I'm very interested in that, officially TB free, but they must have had incidents as much as we had some years back, and how did they get to the point that they're at the moment? And, the biosecurity, I've been on farms in Scotland, and I didn't see a huge difference between theirs and ours, in terms of cattle in the fields or sharing of drinkers or troughs or that. So I'm wondering how they've got to that point.
I think up until they achieved that status, they would have been part of, as we are, in terms of the annual TB eradication plans that we have to submit to the Commission for funding. And I mean, the measures, I didn't look at the ones prior to 2009, but they have been broadly similar for years. It is things around testing regimes, it is around movement controls. I suppose what is, going back again to the map I showed you there in 2010, the incidence of disease seemed to be lower. So they were starting effectively from a lower base at a point in time. It's hard to say when. And that's, I suppose, one of the challenges as well. What led Scotland to be able to eradicate or lead to levels of disease that enables them to be TB free? And I think there is a question there that I have to say, in reading a lot of the literature, nobody really has any answers. But I think there's equally a recognition, as I was emphasising, that the control measures, the herd testing regimes, the biosecurity measures have played a part, but nobody knows exactly how significant a part.
Okay, Ian?
Just on that there, did they ever do a cull?
I can't definitively say again. I think they have instances where if there is a TB outbreak within a herd, I mean, a herd could be fully depopulated. I mean,
a cull on badger.
Yeah, I mean, it's not badger cull. I mean, well, again, prior to effectively 1960s and 70s, there may well have been informal or. I mean,
but I mean, when you say there, you know that the TB practically disappeared.
It's still there, but it's a lower background level.
But surely, there had to be something there, maybe that.
Well, as I said, when I was presenting, the 2 researchers who did that paper, the comparative, they actually postulated that TB may actually be, and badgers may be spillover.
Yeah,
so it may not be endemic. So you mightn't have disease that is there.
Yeah, it's passing.
So you could actually have a situation where there could be a period in time where the infection ceases to be an issue, which is automatically then going to reduce your risk of infection to either other badgers or potentially the cattle. I suppose in saying it again, that's not fully understanding again, as nobody has been able to establish the disease pathway between badger and cattle.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think your opportunity, I suppose, in Scotland maybe is to ask in terms of, I mean, I think you're meeting the Farmers Union of Scotland as well, NFU Scotland, in terms of what impacts they've had. But I mean, as they stand, it might give the impression that disease controls are lower, but there's still a very keen eye kept on ensuring that they maintain their status. It's not costing as much as ours is in terms of compensation, but there's still costs.
Yeah, and the imported cattle have been they've been quite strict, very strict.
Well, I think, I mean, the committee inquiry that looked at this, I mean, that was one of the, and I think it's borne out in this as well, movement control and the number of movements, particularly for those herds that are classed as low risk. Those are very stringent. I mean, how many of our herds would be able to say we've only had 2 cattle movements? Or how many business models could operate with only 2 movements of cattle into a herd?
Just,
okay.
Do the the compensation there, is it 100% compensation?
Off the top of my head, I think it is, but I'm bringing more of the information with me tomorrow. I'll go down and print maybe a bit more information off to bring with me. I'll be in the airport with you, so happy to have a chat about it, but off the top of my head, yes.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Certainly very useful, and it'll be interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Agenda item 8, SL1, the Seeds, Malicious and Maintenance Regulations, NI 2014. And I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 202 to 203 and papers from the department at pages 204 to 238. And I advise members that the proposed amendment will implement a regime to control with a view to eradicate wild oat and cereal production. There will be a number of minor technical amendments to ensure that current policy is reflected in legislation and that obligations are met under European law. No comments were received during the consultation process, and there are no adverse equality impacts identified. Any comments from members? Oh, happy enough?
Agreed.
Okay, great. Agenda item 9, correspondence. Can I refer members to the correspondence received at page 241 to 248? The members' content to action correspondence is suggested in the index sheet at page 240. Okay, members. Agenda item 10, the forward work programme. Can I refer members to the forward work programme at pages 250 to 254. Can I draw members' attention to the memo at page 256, which advises that the SL1 Rothwell Island Fishing Exclusion Zones Regulation 2014 have been deferred to the next session. I advise members that it is the intention to invite a geographical spread of the beneficiaries of the Anti-Poverty and Social Inclusion Programme to the stakeholder event on the 20th of November 2014. Should any member wish to invite a relevant specific organisation to the event, can they advise the clerk at the end of the meeting? Agenda item 11. Is there any other business? Anyone? Any business? Not. We move to agenda item 12. Date and time of next meeting. Yes. Before I do that, then we'll
closed.
Close first?
No, we'll close first.
Okay. Next meeting of the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Development will take place on Tuesday, the 4th of November 2014 at 1:30 p.m. in Room 30 Parliament Buildings, and I declare the meeting adjourned. Just